Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Victoria sat in the high-back chair of her office at Newman Enterprises, the skyline of Genoa City sprawling behind her like a world she no longer recognized, her hands clasped tightly around a cold glass of water that did nothing to calm the storm raging inside her. Holden had just left moments ago, his expression tight and almost apologetic, but the words he had spoken echoed through her mind with the weight of a sledgehammer. Victoria, Claire's DNA. It's not what you think. She's not your daughter. At first, the phrase had seemed like some cruel misheard joke, a twisted piece of gossip that her mind refused to accept, but the stark clarity in Holden's eyes had left no room for doubt. Victoria's world, painstakingly constructed over decades of ambition, love and betrayal, felt like it was collapsing in slow motion. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the betrayal and the life-altering implications that now lay bare in front of her. She had always prided herself on knowing every facet of her family, every secret buried within the walls of her home, every maneuver in the corporate battlefield that was Newman Enterprises, and yet here she was, blindsided by the revelation that the daughter she had raised, loved and fought for, the child she had believed was her flesh and blood, was not connected to her in the way she had spent years imagining. She remembered every milestone, every hug, every bedtime story, every proud moment when Claire had achieved something remarkable, and the reality that it had been built on a lie, or at the very least a truth she had never known, pierced her heart like ice. The office felt smaller, the shadows longer, and the air heavier as if the very walls were mocking her sense of certainty, whispering that nothing in her life was immune to betrayal. Her first instinct was anger, hot and blinding, directed at Holden for revealing the secret and at everyone who had been complicit, whether through ignorance or malice, in allowing her to live this lie. But anger quickly gave way to grief, sharp and unrelenting, as images of Claire's childhood flashed in her mind. The first time she had held her, the way her tiny hand had wrapped around Victoria's finger, the laughter and tears they had shared, all now tainted by uncertainty. Questions began to swirl with maddening speed. Who was Claire's biological mother? Who had kept this from her and why? Was this another ploy? Another twisted scheme in a city where loyalty was rare and deception rampant? Her gaze drifted to the framed photographs on her desk. Happy moments frozen in time, smiles and laughter that now felt painfully hollow, taunting her with their authenticity, their unintentional cruelty. The thought of confronting Nick, of having to piece together what he knew and when, made her stomach twist in knots, and yet she knew she could not avoid it. The people she trusted or thought she did, were suddenly suspects in a tangled web of deceit that reached into every corner of her life. Victoria's mind raced through scenarios, conversations, confrontations, and possible fallout, each more painful than the last. She thought of Billy and Jill, of Phyllis and Jack, of Abby, and the impact this revelation would have not just on her, but on the entire Newman and Abbott families. The potential for alliances to crumble, for reputations to be shattered, for careers to be jeopardized loomed large, but none of that mattered in that moment. Nothing mattered except Claire, her daughter, and the undeniable bond that felt as real as her own heartbeat, a bond that suddenly seemed both fragile and precious in the wake of this truth. She imagined the conversation with Claire, the questions she would have to answer, the trust that might be broken, and the tears that were sure to come. The thought of Claire looking at her with confusion, hurt, and perhaps betrayal, made Victoria's chest tighten in a way that no corporate battle ever had. She felt a surge of desperation, a primal need to protect her child even from the truth, but deep down she knew that shielding Claire was no longer an option. Holden had made it clear that this information could not be ignored. It was a bombshell that, once unearthed, could not be reburied. Victoria tried to steady herself, inhaling slowly, willing her body to cooperate, but the calm she so desperately sought remained elusive. She stood abruptly, knocking over a pen, her reflection in the window staring back at her with wide, fearful eyes, a woman who had always controlled every situation now powerless before the uncontrollable force of reality. Her phone buzzed with messages she couldn't bring herself to read, emails that could wait, calls that would have to be answered later. She walked over to the window, pressing her hand to the cool glass, watching as the city continued its rhythm, oblivious to the private apocalypse that had just struck her life. Somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the shock and betrayal, A spark of determination ignited. Victoria had survived losses, betrayals, and scandals before, and she would survive this too, but things would never be the same. She would uncover the truth, confront those responsible, and protect Claire at all costs. But more than anything, Victoria realized that she had to redefine what family meant, what love meant, and how trust could be rebuilt after such a seismic fracture. The revelation of Claire's DNA was more than a fact. It was a challenge, a call to action, a reshaping of reality that would test her resilience, her intelligence, and the very core of her identity. She thought of Victor, of the battles they had fought together and against each other, and wondered what his reaction would be, what secrets he himself might be keeping, and whether this new truth would unite them or drive another wedge into their already complicated relationship. The office felt suffocating, the city lights outside twinkling like distant stars, indifferent to her turmoil. Victoria's heart ached with every beat, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the precariousness of trust. The narrative of her life, once seemingly linear and under her control, had fractured into jagged pieces, each demanding attention, each requiring her to navigate a labyrinth of deceit, emotion, and revelation. She would have to summon every ounce of strength, every skill she had honed over years of navigating the treacherous waters of Genoa City, to face what came next. And she would. With a slow, deliberate breath, Victoria straightened her spine, wiped the tears from her cheeks, and made her way to the door, knowing that the path ahead would be fraught with pain, confrontation, and heartbreak, but also with clarity, courage, and she hoped eventual reconciliation. Because while DNA could not be rewritten, love and loyalty could still be forged, and Victoria was determined to fight for every ounce of truth, justice, and family that remained in her shattered, yet unbroken world. The first step was finding Claire, telling her what she now knew, and facing whatever storm would inevitably follow, because in Genoa City, the truth had a way of rising to the surface, whether anyone was ready or not. And Victoria Newman, resilient, formidable, and unwavering, would face it head-on, even if it meant her entire world would never be the same again. Victoria's mind was a storm of chaos, every thought colliding with the next, each one a sharpened shard cutting through her resolve. She paced the length of her office, her heels clicking against the polished wood floor like a countdown she could neither stop nor control. The revelation about Claire's DNA had not only shaken her identity but had forced her to question every relationship she had ever held dear, every moment she had treasured as a mother. Was the love she felt for Claire diminished by the knowledge that the girl she had raised was not biologically hers? Absolutely not, but the revelation introduced an unrelenting tension, a gnawing sense of vulnerability that Victoria had never allowed herself to feel in all the years she had ruled Newman Enterprises and manipulated the complex social tapestry of Genoa City. She tried to envision the chain of events that could have led to this: mistakes, lies, cover-ups, but the more she considered them, the more impossible it seemed that anyone had acted in good faith. Holden, who had delivered the news with a gentleness that barely masked his unease, had been only the messenger. The truth itself was far more dangerous and complicated. She thought of Nick, of all the sacrifices he had made for family loyalty, of the times he had shielded her from harm, and she wondered if he had ever suspected the truth, or if this too had been kept from him. The idea that she might have unknowingly built her life on a lie sent a chill racing down her spine, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a rare, unaccustomed panic that made her grip her desk as though it could anchor her to reality. And then came the thought of Claire herself, the child who had been her constant companion, her source of pride, the one link to a future Victoria had always imagined would be secure and predictable. How would Claire react? Would she feel betrayed, angry, confused? Or would she, in her youthful and unassuming way, understand that love was more than DNA? Victoria's mind spun endlessly with possibilities, and none of them offered comfort. She recalled the countless nights she had spent lying awake, contemplating corporate strategy, family alliances, and her own ambitions, and now in that solitary office, she realized that nothing in her carefully constructed universe could prepare her for a crisis of the heart. Her vision blurred, and she leaned against the window for support, staring out at Genoa City, its streets illuminated with life that seemed indifferent to her turmoil. The honking of distant cars, the laughter of passers-by, the faint glow of neon signs all mocked the internal chaos she could not escape. Each beat of her heart seemed louder than the last, echoing the urgency of decisions she had yet to make. Should she confront Victor first, warn him that his granddaughter, or what he believed to be his granddaughter, was not who they thought she was? The thought of engaging in a conversation with Victor, the man who had always been both her anchor and her adversary, made her stomach tighten. She knew Victor would demand answers, would dissect every motive, every lie, and every omission, and the confrontation was inevitable, whether she was ready or not. But for now, Claire's welfare was paramount. Victoria forced herself to sit, her body trembling slightly, and began drafting mental strategies, contemplating every possible approach to breaking the news to her daughter. She thought of recruiting Phyllis, of seeking guidance from Jill, even of confiding in Nick, whose insight into family dynamics was unmatched, but ultimately, she knew this was a test she had to face alone, a challenge she had to navigate as Victoria Newman, mother and protector, with nothing but her wits and her love for Claire to guide her. She envisioned Claire's reaction in painstaking detail. The initial confusion, the flood of questions, the heartbreak, the accusations that might come, the fear of losing the life she had always known. Victoria wanted to preemptively soften the blow, to construct a narrative that would allow Claire to understand that blood did not define family, that the years of love, guidance, and shared experiences remained unchanged by a single genetic fact. But even as she formulated these comforting words, she knew that the truth could not be sugar-coated entirely. Honesty had to be preserved, even when it was painful. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts, and she looked up to see Abby standing hesitantly, concern etched across her features. "Victoria, you look... I don't even know how to say this. Are you okay?" Abby's voice trembled, a mixture of fear and sympathy, and Victoria struggled to maintain composure. "I've received information, Abby. Something that changes everything," she said carefully, her tone measured but laced with the tremor of her inner turmoil. Abby stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her, and sat across from Victoria, instinctively sensing the gravity of the moment. "Is it about Claire?" she asked softly, and Victoria nodded, the gesture carrying the weight of the revelation itself. "Yes," she admitted, her voice low. "Holden told me her DNA. It's not what we believed it to be. She isn't biologically mine." Abby's eyes widened and she reached across the desk, placing a comforting hand on Victoria's arm. "Oh, Victoria, I can't imagine how you feel right now." Victoria swallowed hard, fighting tears that threatened to spill, and nodded. "I don't even know where to begin," she confessed. "Every plan, every hope, every assumption I've made about my family, it's all been upended. And now I have to figure out how to tell her, how to protect her, how to navigate the fallout with Victor, Nick, and everyone else who has stakes in this family." Abby squeezed her arm, offering silent solidarity, and Victoria drew strength from the gesture, realizing that even in the darkest moments, there were allies, there were hands to hold, there were hearts that could help bear the unbearable weight of truth. Yet even as she allowed herself a moment of solace, her mind immediately returned to the practical implications, corporate consequences, family alliances, the potential for scandal, and the intricate web of deception that had surrounded Claire's birth and upbringing. She knew that secrecy had a way of unraveling, that hidden truths had a propensity to explode when least expected, and that every relationship she valued was now vulnerable to rupture. She had to act decisively, to strategize not just for emotional preservation, but for the survival of her family's legacy. Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts and weighing options, considering conversations, confrontations, and the timing of disclosures. Should she speak with Victor first, ensuring he hears it from her rather than another source? Or should she approach Claire directly, preparing for the inevitable emotional storm before it could engulf her? Each path carried risks, each decision had consequences, and Victoria's usual confidence felt eroded by the enormity of the situation. She thought of the potential reactions of the other Newman siblings, Nick, Adam, Abby, and the intricate ways in which this revelation could shift loyalties, inflame rivalries, and unsettle the delicate balance of power that had been carefully maintained over the years. And then there was the emotional dimension, the one that no business acumen or strategic brilliance could navigate. Claire herself. She considered Claire's innocence, her trust, her love for Victoria, and realized that the revelation could shatter the child's sense of security, her understanding of family, and her perception of herself. Victoria felt a pang of guilt, knowing that the truth, though unavoidable, would bring pain. And yet she also understood that withholding it would be a betrayal of a different kind, a lie that could corrode the very foundation of trust between mother and daughter. The weight of this responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, making her feel older, wearier, yet more determined than ever. Victoria Newman had faced countless challenges, had endured betrayals, scandals, and corporate warfare. But this was personal, intimate, and devastating in a way that left her raw and exposed. And still, beneath the pain and uncertainty, a flicker of resolve burned bright. She would face this head-on, she would fight for her daughter, she would preserve what could be preserved, and she would navigate the treacherous waters of Genoa City with the same unrelenting drive that had always defined her. With a deep, shuddering breath, she stood, squared her shoulders, and began the painstaking process of planning her next steps. There would be conversations to be had, truths to be told, and alliances to be tested. But Victoria Newman was nothing if not resilient. As the city outside her window continued its indifferent pulse, she realized that while her world had been irrevocably altered, her capacity to endure, to protect, and to act had not. The revelation of Claire's DNA was not just a bombshell. It was a call to action, a challenge that would test every facet of Victoria's strength, cunning, and maternal devotion. And she would rise to meet it, no matter how devastating the path ahead might be. Because in the world of Genoa City, where secrets ruled and betrayal lurked in every shadow, Victoria Newman would always fight for family, for truth, and for the life she refused to surrender, even when the foundations beneath her seemed to crumble. Victoria exhaled sharply, forcing herself to push past the paralysis that threatened to consume her. She knew she couldn't linger in her office any longer, trapped in a cycle of thought and fear. The next steps had to be deliberate, measured, yet decisive. Because in Genoa City, hesitation was a luxury she could not afford. She gathered herself, smoothing her blazer and running a hand through her hair, trying to mask the tremor that had taken hold in the wake of Holden's revelation. The first person she needed to confront was Victor. No one could process this news alone, and if anyone had the power, the history, and the insight to navigate the fallout, it was him. She imagined his expression, the carefully controlled face that masked storms beneath, the sharp eyes that always saw more than anyone let on. And she knew that when Victor learned this, if she didn't tell him first, the consequences could ripple through every corner of her family, through every decision she had ever made. But she also knew that the conversation with Victor had to be approached with care. She needed to anticipate his anger, his disappointment, his endless questions, and be prepared to defend not just herself, but Claire, whose well-being had now become a battlefield. Yet even as the practical side of her mind strategized, the emotional core of her being pulsed with an urgency that no plan could contain. She had to see Claire first. She had to prepare herself to speak the truth to the girl she had loved with every ounce of her heart, even if the words came trembling, even if they shattered the fragile trust they had built over years. She envisioned Claire's wide eyes, her innocent hope, her unwavering faith in the stability of her family, and Victoria's chest tightened with both fear and fierce protectiveness. She could almost hear the questions that would come. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Am I not really your daughter? Who are my real parents? Each imagined question struck her like a blow, but Victoria knew that the honesty, though painful, had to be absolute. There could be no evasions, no half-truths, because the foundation of their relationship was at stake. Pushing herself toward action, she left her office, each step resonating with determination and dread, and made her way through the halls of Newman Enterprises, the familiar surroundings now seeming foreign and hollow, echoing the disruption that had seeped into every part of her life. As she passed familiar portraits and awards, reminders of her victories and her history, she realized that everything she had achieved, every battle she had won, could now feel meaningless if she failed in the most essential role she had ever held, that of a mother. And yet, beneath the fear and uncertainty, there remained the unyielding core of Victoria Newman. Resilient, strategic, and fiercely devoted. She would face Victor, face Claire, face every challenge this revelation had set before her, and she would emerge not just intact but resolute, because love, truth, and family were worth more than any comfort, any illusion, or any lie that had kept them from reality until now.